Fancy meeting you here. Tight hips? Painful hips?
Perhaps they're just weak or lacking in range of motion. Here's a setup to either create new range of motion or train and strengthen owning the range that you already have. For this setup, I'll be lying down on the ground. Here I have a yoga block to support my neck. The goal of this exercise is to get this leg, the one that's next to the ground, better at rotating. So for my setup, I am on the ground, shoulders stacked, pelvis stacked, and I'll be taking this top leg and straightening it out. Here my thighs at 90 degrees to my torso. My top leg from heel to knee to hip to shoulder to head is all one straight line. I'll be focusing on this leg. This will be our working leg. So the goal again of this exercise is to improve this leg's ability to externally rotate, this hip's ability
To externally rotate.
where the thigh is rotating to the outside of the body. Here you see my heel lifting, but this action is being driven by the hip musculature and hip capsule, where this thigh bone sits inside this pelvis. So this exercise is designed, and this setup is designed to improve this thigh's capacity to rotate in its socket and strengthen the surrounding musculature. Hips are designed to rotate. They have the second greatest range of motion of any joint in the body, or should, second only to the shoulders. So a hip that rotates better is a hip that hips better. Hips that don't rotate don't hip. In this setup, again, straight line from the top leg, heel, knee, hip, shoulder, head. This thigh, 90 degrees. My ribs are a little lifted up off the ground to keep a nice straight spine. Here's a simple test. We'll begin by taking this thigh into its greatest passive range of motion. For this, you're going to use your top hand. Now this will create a little bit of disalignment in our setup. If you feel best, a yoga strap is our friend. Hook this around the foot or the ankle and give it a tug, okay? From here, I'm going to be taking a big breath in and creating tension in the whole body. The kind of tension in my body that I would produce if I were trying to bend an iron bar. I want to create stiffness everywhere. Then I'm going to focus on producing stiffness in this hip. I'm going to squeeze the muscles that would leave this heel right here were I to let go of the strap. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So breath in, big squeeze in the whole body, and then slowly release the hands from the strap or release the hands from your foot, asking that ankle to stay right where it is. Here's a good moment for an exhale. Hold, 2, 3, and then we'll go ahead and grab that strap again and reset. Now, I said this is a good test. If what happens is you produce a big stretch, right, here's my end range passively, and you let go of that strap and that leg just drops, right? You cannot get it to stay in place. This drop is the difference between the range of motion that you own passively in this hip versus the range of motion that you own actively. And the name of this game over time is to close that gap. Okay, so we want to be able to actively own all the range of motion that you can access in that hip socket. This comes back to the tightening. If you have tightness in an area, very often that is a protective strategy from the brain. Okay, it knows that you don't actually own the range of motion that your body can access. And so it will put on the handbrakes. It will say, no, I will not let you access that range of motion. You don't control it. I don't want you to get hurt. This is how you control it. This is how you strengthen it. Okay, so let's groove that. Find your passive end range. Okay, note here, I'm pulling as high as I can go without anything else coming along for the ride. So if I feel that hip hiking, I've gone too far. If I feel these ribs drop and crush into the ground, I've gone too far. I want you to feel some side ab rolls here in the setup, okay? Breath in, find your passive end range, knee down into the mat, heel up towards your shoulder or face, pull, and release slowly. Hold, 2, 3. Great. Wash, rinse, repeat. I'd love to see sets of 8 to 10 repetitions. 3 of them would be fantastic, okay? This is to gain control over the range that you already own. But this stuff isn't the only stuff in the hip. We also have stuff on the other side. So for this, I'm going to grab another block, okay? I'm going to prop that right underneath my foot and ankle. Now we can train both sides of the hip, okay? So I'm going to take a big breath in, and I'm going to rotate my ankle down into this block. And here we're going to turn the volume up on this work slowly. So whereas in the first setup we were just holding, in this one I want to turn the volume up on that work slowly. I'm not going to jump from 0 to 100%. Can you go from 0 to 10 at 1, 2, 3% increments? 10 to 20. 20 to 30, turning that volume up. Working our way up to 100% of your maximum, safest, greatest effort. Okay? And this is ankle down into the block. If that block were not there, I am trying to do this with my thigh. Okay? Do not let that knee lift. Do not let your ribs drop. Do not let your pelvis roll open or shift around. Put that work right into the side of butt stuff. So I'm going to build over the course of 10 seconds from 0% to 100%, slowly, smoothly. I'll hold for 10 to 15, exhaling, squeezing everything in the body like I'm bending that iron bar. After those 10 to 15 seconds, let's walk it back down, ramp back down, take the tension out the same way we came in, don't just let it go. Now let's switch. Let's access that same tissue that we were playing around with earlier. I'll have you lift, rotating that hip socket, rotating that thigh, ankle sweeps up towards your face and the ceiling. Lifting, lifting, keeping that side ab wall squeeze, ribs off the ground. Hold for 10 to 15, relax on down. If we want to progress this setup, we can come up to the elbow, okay? Slightly less would be elbow a little further away from the body, slightly more, elbow a little bit more stacking the shoulder. Either way, either position we pick, what we're looking is to keep this elbow driven into the ground, shoulder away from the ear. This is going to ensure that those ribs do not collapse into the ground, that they stay nice and lifted. We want those nice and lifted so that when we play around with producing stretch through this hip socket, when we play around with producing squeeze and hold through this hip socket, that we know that it's coming from the thigh turning against the pelvis and not the pelvis coming along for the ride. This thigh turning against pelvis. If I run out of room and those ribs dump, that means that I've run out of room in that hip socket and that pelvis is coming along for the ride. Either I don't have anything left, or I need to produce more control and more squeeze to make sure that I'm actually getting thigh rotating against pelvis and not pelvis coming along for the ride. So 2 options. 1, push the ground away, lift those ribs, hold real hard, okay? Second option, and I suggest this if you're just beginning, is to take that same yoga block that we were using for the head, let's go ahead and prop that up just under the ribs, right? Doesn't need to hold me up, but a little millimeter below my ribs when I'm driving away, that's going to give me great feedback. If I feel my ribs collapsing into that yoga block, that's my cue to push hard, redirect that force back into my hip, and don't let it bleed out into the ground. So, same thing as I was lying down, nice straight line. Yoga block here is giving me feedback. I create tension, push the ground away, and I'm going to use this yoga strap and pull. And hold, 2, 3. Here you see I got a little bit of a drop. I need to work on closing that gap. Hold, 2, 3.
I can also,
again in this position, train the other side of the joint. Here I'm going to create a little higher block. Now I'm training a slightly deeper angle. Again, building, pressing, work up to your safest, greatest effort, hold for 10 to 15 seconds, relax on down, and then switch. Pull, pull, pull on this stuff. The inside stuff, trying to get that ankle off the block. At this deep angle, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that ankle up, but I'm still going to work on producing that force. I can think about trying to get light on my elbow. So here I am pulling, and I'm using all of this inside stuff to try to get light on my elbow. I'm getting a big squeeze in through this groin tissue here. So still training it to squeeze, still getting the strength training benefits of squeezing that tissue. If I want to get a good stretch into the deep socket stuff, okay, what I can do is I can take the same setup, maybe slightly lower, maybe a little higher if you have more range like me. I can come up on this hand, and same thing, I want to make sure that I am pulling those ribs up away from the ground, knee down in, twisting that thigh in the socket, and I'm reaching the pelvis down and long, and I should feel a wound up stretch deep inside that socket. Here I'll do the same thing, okay? Breath in. Drive a little force, 0 to 100. Ramp on down, and pull. Pull, 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 pull. Train this other side. For the lifts, or for the passive range holds, I'd love to see you work up to 3 sets of 10 at body weight. Once you can hit 3 sets of 10, we can add a little weight. Either you use a TheraBand or a yoga strap. I would start with a 1 pound weight, can of soup, something light, wrap that to the ankle, or perhaps you have ankle weights which are specifically designed for this. Start to add weight to this movement. Drop the number of repetitions. Maybe you're doing 3 sets of 6, lifting that weight into your end range or holding that weight at your end range. Work your way back up to 3 sets of 10, and then take the weight up again just a little bit. Wash, rinse, repeat over time. Get strong at rotating your hips, and your hips will thank you by being better hips. You should feel pain and weakness and tightness start to dissipate over time. Give it a shot. Let me know how it goes.